This is Alan Olson, and welcome to American Dreams. My guest today is Warren Stickney. Warren, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, Warren,
Good.
you have a very unique background, and maybe for the listeners, you can bring us through what brought you up to today. Establishing the history and experiences along the way.
Yeah, that would be great. So I entered the financial planning field eventually after a background in the solar industry and actually music business. And so what became interesting is I moved along in the journey and located here in Bellevue, Washington, in the background with Microsoft in my backyard. I had many people from Microsoft coming to me saying, "Well, you know what? We can work with Goldman Sachs or anybody, so why are we going to work with you?" And what became interesting is I said, "Well, what is your biggest pain point?" Well, at the time, the biggest pain point was the taxation on the stock grants or stock options that they were getting. And so I looked at it, and from my background in solar was fairly good with partnerships because I had been doing, solar micro utilities and partnerships. And so, well, what if we did a charitable partnership? And actually somewhat quasi invented the process, brought it through a bunch of attorneys to get it okay tax wise, and then the whole thing that we were able to do is legally avoid the tax on the exercise of options and do a lot of cool philanthropic things along the way. So that was my background, and interestingly, that concept died because of abuse, not something that we did, but something that another planner had done. And I've just learned that Mark Zuckerberg actually did that with the Facebook stock about 5 years ago. And now it is all the rage. So things have come full circle.
Well, it's interesting. I guess every good idea seems to be shut down by the IRS eventually. And
At least if it's abused, definitely.
yeah. Well, and I in my prior life, many years ago, I was an IRS agent, and so I started my career in the mid '80s, and that's about the time that they had all these tax shelters. And they had Altamont Pass, the windmills, they had the solar farms, they had all these energy credits, and someone said, you ought to go after all these shelters, and and someone inside the IRS made the point. There's an higher management said, I think we need to be careful because Congress was the one that actually set that up as a tax incentive. And so I thought it was ironic that sometimes the good ideas are actually put in by Congress, and the enforcement people that are enforcing it sometimes are the problem. So
Fascinating. I
if
didn't know that. That's really interesting.
yeah, well, we actually dropped the project, right? So and then my wife told me to get out of the IRS and go find another job. So all right, so Warren, so you're up in Washington. Is it Bellevue? Did I hear?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. And so you're right in the heart of Microsoft, and you got Boeing. You got a lot of
Yeah, I've got
companies up there.
Microsoft and Amazon,
Okay.
both headquartered here. Microsoft with 120,000 employees, not all located here, but a huge background.
So Warren, someone comes to you and says, "Hey, Warren, I'm wealthy on paper, but now I want to go cash my paper and convert it to cash." Uh, yeah, where do you start with somebody like that? And I'm going to throw out a number. Say it's over $10 million. Where do you
Yeah, so
start?
let me give you kind of the journey because I wish I had a drive up window of people that knew what I was doing. So
Okay.
oftentimes what happens is with Microsoft now they're on a grant process. So what they end up is getting large grants, and the grants now vest quarterly. So without doing anything, they don't have the latitude of deciding when they're going to be paying the tax. It just is set in motion, and if they're successful, they're going to have more and more grants coming, and then they vest, and that's how it works. And most of the time, many planners and many CPAs are not well versed on this, or what they think is that with charitable remainder trusts, they say, oh, you can't use that because you can't transfer the stock prior to exercise. And the conventional wisdom would be that you would only do this with an asset like an appreciated stock that you could transfer ahead of time. Well, what I
Mhm.
looked at is the economics of this actually in using the cash that comes, and then if they love the stock, they can rebuy it in the trust. But with leverage in the trust, it's actually able to significantly offset the tax. So it's really a tax offset, but it works incredibly well.
Interesting. So, when you set these trusts up, the mechanics of it are essentially you're gonna get some type of benefit up front then? Tax
Yes,
benefit?
exactly. Because the goal of a lot of people, and so what we always look at kind of in philanthropy is a philanthropic pyramid that I like to say. So first, just like they say on the airplane, you got to put your own mask on first before helping others. The
Mhm.
same thing follows kind of through. Once we've determined the critical capital that they need to live, then what we'll look at it say is okay, with a charitable trust, the way the trusts work for the most part that we use are where you're not really giving the money away. It goes to the charity at your death, or if you're so inclined, and what we've kind of pioneered is using some of the money ahead of time once you're at the critical mass level. But so that's what we'll do. So then we analyze kind of the various structures available and help them create the trust.
So, basically what you're doing is you're setting up a private annuity, if I understand it, of which the charity is holds the
Well, it's
remainder after.
actually it's a charitable. The specific trust type is called a NIMCRA. So
Oh,
it's a
okay.
net
Yeah.
income makeup charitable remainder trust.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
what's kind of a nuance with that is you can actually have insurance in the trust. And if you've got insurance in the trust, which nobody ever had thought of doing, you actually guarantee what's going to go to the charity in the end, and you could pull more money out of the trust for yourself.
Wow.
So it just makes a whale of a lot of sense when you think about it, because the IRS's concern always with the charitable trust is once you've set it up, that the charity's not going to get anything because you're going to be living on the money, and if the investments don't work out, then you're sunk. But we can actually structure it in such a way that we know charity's going to get money in the end. It enables you to pull more money for yourself.
So, Warren, you recently did a book. It's increasing your
Oh,
started to
wow.
say wealth, but now it's
It's
worth
it's
increase. Yeah.
increased your it's increased your worth with wealth crossed off. And
Okay.
kind of the exciting thing for me with this was the notion of not being the richest person in the graveyard. And what prompted this really is with the course of doing the planning that I've done over the years. So I'd love to share two stories of client successes um, that again have worked out extremely well. One client success was a gentleman, the physician. He's happy for me to share the story, so if it's okay, I will. Um, but was facing annual income that was significant, and really had done a lot with Doctors Without Borders and traveled the world. So kind of in working on this together, said, well, what can be done? You know, I would love to actually do something medically and educationally. So he identified a place in Uganda, and we set up one of these trusts. With the immediate tax savings of the trust, we were able to start funding the building of a school. And for by managing this and we learned a whole lot by managing this himself. With local people in the city of Uganda, we built a school that by U.S. standards is remarkable for $250,000. So when you think of the amount of impact one can have with a relatively modest, so with the trust, we were saving more than that in income tax per year. So it was 1 year's worth of tax savings that funded this school. So now we're off on other projects. Um, and that's so
You know
that's
what
just
I love
one.
what I love about what you're doing there, Warren, is you're just not doing uh, running numbers or running spreadsheets. You're as you work with people, you're engaging them in purpose. Just kind of doing a comprehensive solution there of helping people fulfill their mission, their philanthropic goals, and then seeing what tools can be used, uh, to help people save on to what they have.
That really is my mission. So it's like what I would say. I feel my mission on Earth is to show people what can be done and enable them to do it. And then, what I've heard is that a lot of people's goal in life, as they're reaching their wealth numbers, the goal is to initially they'll say, "Oh, I want to go golfing." Well, they retire, and after a couple months, it's like eventually they become bored, and then they become boring. And so, because if we all take care of ourselves, we're going to live a lot longer. It's like, what can we connect with that is a much more significant purpose that might carry multiple generations in a family of enthusiasm? And the way that I've seen clients' energy reborn with both these clients that were kind of near retirement, they are on fire. I mean, they cannot wait to do more. And yesterday, I was talking with this client that's doing building medical clinics in Africa. Now she wants to use this as a model. Uh, International Rotary is now supporting her, and so what we're actually doing is creating a model that will be a cookie cutter model for building medical clinics and hospitals in needy countries. And again, for
Hmm.
tiny numbers. I mean, it's $100,000 per clinic hospital.
So, Warren, we live in a really changing world right now. Uh, Anyone in the stock market, watches the account fluctuate up and down every day, how and for people that are trying to get predictability and peace of mind, what do you advise? How do you advise them? Is there any sound advice that you can share with us as listeners?
Well, yeah, kind of my philosophy, which may sound boring, but it's always, and I kind of learned this years ago, is that if we can quantify, which we do in the course of all this planning, the amount of money that somebody needs per year, my general philosophy is to ladder what you need in bonds and go out 7 or 8 years, always in laddered bonds. And as the bonds mature, we cash them in and live on both the principal and the interest and always stay 7 to 8 years out. So when we have a market, this is just normal, right? What we're seeing in the market is normal. And just because the market's gone up, nonstop for the past 10 years, that actually is not normal. This is. But if we can show people a way, before we had kind of the acronym TINAs, there is no alternative to stocks because you couldn't do anything in the bond market. Well, now with bonds, a 2 year bond at 4.5%, suddenly there's plenty of things that people can do. So to me, it's really an all the above approach. And planning wise, always when people will say to me, "Oh, do you like this or do you like that?" And to me, it's a little bit like saying, "Do you like a hammer or a screwdriver?" And I'll say, "I don't know. Tell me what the job is I'm trying to do." Because I probably could do the job with either one, but it's going to be far more efficient with one than another, depending on the task.
So, Warren, this new generation, the Gen Xers, or even more recent, they'll often have an attitude. Well, I think I can do everything myself, Warren. And why don't I just, rather than do a bond ladder strategy, buy a short term bond fund, a midterm, and a long term? Okay, now there's something inherently wrong with that. And as an advisor, how would you respond to that? The
Well, what I would say,
person.
I talked to them about two things. One is interesting because Vanguard, which is kind of the pioneer of indexing and low cost mutual funds, has a piece that called Advisor Alpha. And what the piece actually demonstrates by Vanguard, which is interesting, is that the value an advisor adds is around 1 to 2% at least, which more than covers their fee. And the other thing I love those clients, by the way, because I always say one of the things we don't normally, even though you would watch a YouTube video on doing brain surgery, it may not be something that you would want to try on one of your kids. And not that financial planning is brain surgery by any amount, but by any stretch of the imagination. But there is significant value in what I would say as an advisor, a good advisor. What I do is bring things to the table that would never occur to them. So, and I'll explain to you kind of my story as well with the market when the market does corrections. There's two different experiences we have. One experience, we're flying across the country, and the pilot gets on and says, "You know what? I want you to get up if you need to go to the bathroom because in about 15 minutes, we're going to go through some turbulence, and I'm going to have everybody sit down. And it's going to last 20 minutes. Then I'll take the seatbelt signs off, but I just thought I would let you know." So that's one experience. The other experience is where you're flying along, and suddenly the pilot gets on and with a harsh tone says, "Take your seats, flight attendants, take your jump seats and everybody put on your seatbelts." In both scenarios, same journey across the country, same turbulence, same weather. In one thing, you're prepared and you know what to expect. And your experience at the end of the day is completely different. So that's what the younger people, what I will say is things that you have yet to see, we've seen hundreds of times and you may enjoy it more if you're with somebody that can guide you rather than having to experience it yourself.
Thank you. That's great conventional wisdom. Warren, if a person wants to reach out and contact you, how would they go ahead and do that?
They could email us, just Warren at stickneyresearch.com, or with our book. Uh, we have a website as well that's tied in the book, increaseyourworth.com. But, or 425-462-6335. We would love to help anybody, even if you're entertaining the idea. I absolutely am more passionate about what I'm doing in enabling people to change the world. So please reach out if remotely this is of interest to you.
Warren, I appreciate you being with us today.